So, hello everyone and welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are here again for another week of our Turning Towards Life conversation. I'm feeling very, very glad to be doing this again, and it's Lizzie, I suppose it's the nature of practice that we've spoken about so much. I'm noticing how helpful it is to have a practice like this, whether or not I feel glad about it, and then it opens into the possibility that I might feel all kinds of ways. And actually, always, once I step in through the door of our being together and taking a source, thank you for this wonderful source that you've brought us this week, and then widening this conversation out into the many, many, many circles of people who are alongside with us, I can feel my gladness kindling. And that's a great blessing, and I'm going to sneeze any second. So I'm going to stop speaking and you're going to speak.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome, everybody, however you're listening, where you're listening. Maybe you're walking the dog, or maybe you're trying to go to sleep, or maybe you're in your kitchen or something, in your car. You're so welcome to be here with us. And if you're new here, the routine is that we choose a source and then we start talking and see what happens. So we don't rehearse this, we don't plan out what we're going to say, we don't kind of have a crib sheet or anything, we just see and respond to one another. And it really is an unknown path. The only known bit is what the words are in the source. So I don't know Beth Clark, who wrote this lovely little passage that we're having as our source for today, which, if you want to find it, is in the show notes. And as we publish it live on Facebook, we put the source in the announcement that we're going live. And also it's just on the Facebook page as well every Friday before the Sunday. Although this week I forgot on the Friday, Justin, I did it on the Saturday morning. And Justin and I alternate the weeks choosing the source. So it's a very sophisticated methodology, Justin, isn't it? And then the cool behind the scenes part is that whoever chooses the source doesn't start speaking. So if you notice, Justin started speaking today because I chose the source. And the funny thing is, it took me, I don't know, about a year to figure that out. You just used to say it and I go, okay, yeah, that's what's happening. And then one day I thought, oh, I think there's a formula here, which is that if you choose the source, you don't start the conversation. Anyway, so I was a bit slow on the uptake on that one, but it's quite a fun little behind the scenes. Sometimes my brain doesn't work very well, piece of information for you all. So here is this little passage by Beth Clark, and I'll read it, Justin will read it, and then we'll see what happens in the conversation, what we'll learn together. So here we go. I've noticed something about people who make a difference in the world. They hold the unshakable conviction that individuals are extremely important, that every life matters. They get excited over one smile. They are willing to feed one stomach, educate one mind, and treat one wound. They aren't determined to revolutionize the world all at once. They're satisfied with small changes. Over time, though, the small changes add up. Sometimes they even transform cities and nations, and yes, the world.
Thanks, Lizzie. I've noticed something about people who make a difference in the world. They hold the unshakable conviction that individuals are extremely important, that every life matters. They get excited over one smile. They are willing to feed one stomach, educate one mind, and treat one wound. They aren't determined to revolutionize the world all at once. They're satisfied with small changes. And over time, though, the small changes add up. Sometimes they even transform cities and nations, and, yes, the world.
Thanks, Justin. So as you read that, which hasn't happened before, as I've read this a couple of times in the last few days, Justin, as you read it, a very wonderful man came into my head who's a neighbor from the house where I grew up in. He was the neighbor, one of our neighbors, and he was an infectious diseases professor. And his work with his team and his wife on a bicycle kind of thing eradicated smallpox from the United Kingdom. And he did something really amazing. And he was this kind of man. So he would come to, our house for tea, or we'd go there. And as children, they used to let us just go into their house and use their dressing up box, because they had three children who were about 10 years older than all three of us. They had also three children. So we just used to go in and use all their old toys and stuff. And I remember this was a feeling that I had from him, which was, my goodness, you've done extraordinary things in the world that have actually changed things profoundly. But if he ever met one of our friends or a young person who was doing something, very ordinary or extraordinary, whatever it was, he was so interested in them. And he would say, "Oh, goodness me, I can't even imagine what that is. You're going to have to tell me more about that." He didn't take anything for granted, or dismiss anything, or just do small talk or something. His gaze and his interest and his enthusiasm for whatever somebody was up to, however it showed up, he was profoundly interested. And he always made me think about bigness and smallness, and like societal changes and individual power, and what that really means. And also the kind of humanity that I think is so kind of beautiful, that we're willing for it just to be one thing. Like, if my audience is one person, that's enough for me, just to be in conversation with another person. And so this being satisfied with the small changes, and then they might add up, like they probably will add up. It warms my hopeful heart to know that each of us has this kind of power when the world is topsy-turvy and not doing so well. This human to humanness has me feel hopeful and powerful, and that things are possible. And without that thing, how could I even do a small thing, let alone a big thing?
So lovely hearing stories.
Mm.
And I'm thinking about someone I knew, Lizzie, who taught me. He was a university teacher of mine, and you know this story, I think. He was my director of studies, and I studied computer science for years, which was very interesting to me, but not the place for me to make my contribution. And I was fortunate enough to have the kind of mind that could do very well at academic things. So I did really, really, really well in my university degree. And the obvious thing to do was to go on and to be a computer scientist for the rest of my life. And I felt for a long time that my place to make a contribution is much more in what we're doing in Thirdspace and what we're doing in this conversation. This is my place. And he did this most amazing thing, which was that the day after the exam results came out, and I did very, 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 very well in them, he came and found me, and he was a very sort of shy, gentle man. He was never going to make big gestures in the world. You're not going to see him with a YouTube channel or on Twitter, or and then those didn't exist, but he wasn't the person who would take up those kind of platforms. And he came and he said to me, please don't still be doing computer science in 10 years' time if it's not where your heart is. Mm. He had every reason to go the opposite way, to try and encourage me. And when he said that, I kind of understood it, and I didn't understand it because I couldn't figure out what to do with that at the time. And it took me 10 years. And then when 10 years came and many things started to unravel, I had a place to go back to, someone whose wisdom I really trusted, who'd been in with me in the world that was unraveling, and had already been saying back from them, please pay attention to your own heart. And one thing I know is that my letting go of computer software and my taking up what we do, coaching and development and founding Thirdspace and all of those things, have made many things possible for other people too that I would never have imagined, that had I not been able to listen to him, And I think he's a model for me of someone of that enormousness that Beth Clark is talking about in my own life, because his help for me has been one of the biggest influences in, there are many other influences too, of course, but a sort of pivotal influence in my capacity to be of service to others. And then I've done my best to be of service to other people, and that's helped other people to be of service to other people too. So I think that the thing that, one of the many things that most strikes me about this source is that when we have through circumstances that we don't choose, we have widely varying reach in the world. Some people end up with huge reach, they open their mouths and millions of people listen, and some people have the reach of just the people around them. And there are things we can do to change that reach, but it's not completely in our control. Not everyone is going to become famous or a powerful politician or a, you know, a person with 1 million followers on Twitter or any of those kind of things. But what we always have is the reach to those who are immediately around us. And the reminder that the place to start is to treat every single person as if they were a whole world. To not only have the whole world be the whole world, but to have you, Lizzie, be a whole world, and Justin be a whole world, and each person we meet isn't in any way a kind of giving up of the responsibility to change things. In fact, it seems to me it's the only place to start, even if you turn out to be a person who can shift big systems because of the kind of person you are or the kind of people that you're with. Even for those of us who shift big systems, collectively or individually, the starting point of treating those that we come across, those we know and we don't know, as if they were whole worlds worthy of the dignity and care and courage and respect and love that you would show the whole planet, is the necessary starting point. And we see examples of it. If we look in our lives, we see examples of it. But also, I imagine that the moment we lose this, the moment I go, I'm sorry, Lizzie, I won't treat you like a whole world because I've got a whole world to change, is also the moment that we lose sight of the very thing that we're up to.
Yeah.
Which is help to create the conditions for the flourishing of everyone. And that has to include the unique, vast ones who we meet on the street and in our houses and, you know, across the desk. And
making me think, Justin, of another story. So I've met a person recently who has a very senior leadership role in our National Health Service, and he's one of those people who's doing things and interacting at a level of power that is significant for the way that our National Health Service runs and the way that it is benefiting or not benefiting people as it should. And he's in one of those influential places where things can happen because of the decisions that he makes, and it's really, really hard to be him and to be where he is. And this quote is the thing that I want to send him, because it's only individuals who are ever making those systemic changes. And it feels to me like, well, for me, I could just kind of remove myself and that, well, these people are in a position of power and they're just fine or something. And then, of course, when you get into conversation and you realize on a human level how hard it is and what a challenge it is not to just throw in the towel and say, this is too difficult, I can't do this anymore. And maybe we do that, you know, maybe it is too hard, and that's also just fine. But there's a way that if I can, you know, as I put myself in that person's shoes, it really helps that other human beings see me in what I'm trying to do and who join me in a hopeful way and who can see that it's hard and that I'm supported on a human level. I'm supported on a in a humane and kind and seeing kind of way, and I'm not taken for granted or expected to just be fine or something. And then it seems all the more possible to do that hard work when those human connections are in place and there's support and kindness and honoring and respecting and validation of what it's like to be there. And it seems like that acknowledgement of our powerfulness and our powerlessness at the same time, and acknowledging all of the dynamics at play when we are in those positions, it feels like that makes it more possible for very good people to stay in those decision-making roles. And so I feel like this person I'm thinking of, who is making such a difference, who sometimes can't see that they're making a difference because it's so hard, and because of the ideal that they have set up is kind of never probably going to be reached. But just to support them in who they're being, mattering, just like you're saying, like, this one person is the whole world to me right now as I'm speaking to them. For them to be in receipt of that seems to me to create the possibility that that kind of decency and integrity and goodness in positions of power becomes much more possible for it to continue, that there's goodness there, rather than, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. And then who gets to take up that place? We don't know. Maybe another wonderful, good person with integrity, but maybe not. And so I feel like this, bringing it down to one stomach, one mind, one wound. You're the world right now to me. You're a whole world right now to me. Makes really, really good, important work possible.
It's one of the things that Beth Clark says here, which I'm in agreement with. I've noticed something about people who make a difference in the world. And then Beth doesn't go on to say they don't get up to big things.
Yeah.
Some people do get up to are in a position to get up to very good things. They have a role, and they're, because of all the sort of systemic societal circumstances, they're the ones who end up in the role. What Beth says is that those people, whether the size of your world is one other person or a family system that you're taking care of, or a local system that you're taking care of, they hold the unshakable conviction that individuals are extremely important and that every life matters. I'm thinking about the times when, this seems to me about taking up our proper size, neither being too big nor too small, and then meeting the other as a dignified other who is like I said before, who's a whole world in and of themselves, with the kind of respect and wonder that takes. Even in small systems, if I think about myself as a dad in a small family system of 5, I can think of the times where, because I've got triggered or desperate or tight or frightened or egotistical, or where I've been able to tell myself a story that I'm taking care of the system as a whole, whilst not doing this for the people around me who I love, while forgetting those ones. And I think by and large that's not the way I've lived. By and large, I've lived and wanted to live very consciously and deliberately in this mode that Beth Clark is talking about. But I think we must all have stories about, even if we've committed ourselves to that, of the times that we forgot, and the times we lost ourselves, and the times that, for the sake of something bigger that seemed important, even then we lost sight of the humanity of the ones around us. And I know that when I've been a parent that way, or a partner, or someone in an organization, that my desperation to have the bigger thing happen that was important to me, when it comes at the expense of my own humanity and the humanity of those around us, when I forget the sacredness of those around us, that I might get a big thing done at the cost of great wounding in the small world in which I'm in. And of course, just like my director of studies at university probably unknowingly sent ripples out into the world around me by being kind enough to see me as the person I was, and not just as a person who'd done very, very well in my exams and really ought to be going and being a computer scientist. when we forget this, we also very easily start ripples out into the world that are the opposite of generative. We seed traumas and difficulties and woundings and of our own, and it's very easy to be that person too. And so I think that this source for me is an act of remembering. It's an invitation to remember that no matter what the scale, no matter what our reach is, no matter how important the thing is that we are committed to, that this as a position, as an ethical position, as a position of care, to nevertheless always, as far as we possibly can, dedicate ourselves to the one who is here with us, the one that I'm on the phone to, the ones I'm in a meeting with, the ones I'm around the breakfast table with, is what it takes to build a world where together we respond well and with justice and with care, and also for the sake of the bringing of the gifts of the other people around us. This is the easiest thing to forget, and it's probably easiest to forget. It's probably very easy to forget when we feel very strongly about something that is bigger than those of us that we're in the midst of. That's the place that we lose sight of this. And so one of the obvious consequences of Beth's writing is that it would take only the act of each person treating each other person in the way that this source invites for us to be treating one another in the world consistently on mass scale, as if we mattered. And I know that that's really hard, but that's exactly why it's important.
Making me reflect on motherhood as well, Justin. Of sometimes our world is, as one might see, as small as the four walls of our home, and our children being seen and fed and educated and nurtured. And that might seem like a small thing by comparison to the scale of the world. But if I take this invitation to treat each one of us as the whole world for while I'm with them, in contact with them, it's also a really big world. And for anyone who's, like you were saying, taking parenting into their hearts, which as far as I can tell, most parents are doing. Like we all love our children. That world is big. The responsibility for another human being is huge, profound and huge. And of course, every human is an entire world, like you were saying. You know, if you look at the numbers of humans in the world, it's completely overwhelming to know how many people there are, but then to know that each one of them is a world. I often just kind of sit in the magnitude of inner worldness and how huge an inner world. It's like if you have a conversation with somebody at any depth about anything, you get a glimpse into the magnitude of their world. And then you times that by what the billionness is of humans in the world. The inner worlds of all of us added together is just this massive situation. And taking responsibility for even one of those in terms of the growth and the nurturing and the well-being of that is a huge undertaking. And as you say, it's not disconnected. It's in fact profoundly connected, in my view, to what's then possible. What's possible from a nurtured person versus what's possible from an ignored one or a sidelined one or a forgotten one is a completely different set of possibilities. So I want to also honor sometimes I think it's really easy to feel like our worlds are really small and what am I really doing to make a difference? And I feel like that question gets addressed by being in this conversation. And that really matters, that everyone has a place and can find a place to be included in what our world needs.
Yeah, it seems to me there's on one level that there can be a huge relief in this invitation from Beth. Oh, my job may, if I keep attentive, present to who and what is here, that's the first and most important thing that I have to do. And it's also far from easy, because we all know the ways. If we're a whole, if each of us is a whole world, then of course we're a whole world too, and we have within us those parts of us that will get frightened and desperate and triggered and are traumatized and have memories of things and tune out and numb out and all of those kind of things. And so of course it's also the case that the one side of this invitation is that we can find, if we look around us, people who seem to have lived this way, who are treating each person, whether it's someone that a young person they're raising, or a colleague, or a friend, or someone they've never met. I think most of us, if we look at ourselves only for a little while, we can find all the places where that's been really hard for us to do, because some part of us that's trying to protect us has got in the way. Gosh, how many times I've wanted to be this way and I haven't, because I'm holding on to anger, or because I'm exhausted, or because I'm frightened. And so there is also a turning of this inside that's called for, which is, it seems to me, on the same way that if I'm going to be one for you, Lizzie, that is a support to you then being this to others, because you are feeling met and held and welcomed and fed and healed and all the kinds of things that Beth talks about. Our inner condition is as much a part of how we get to do that in the outer world as anything else. And so it calls upon the very great work of turning towards the parts of ourselves and being the ones who feed them and tend them and heal them and hold them and welcome them, and give them a chance to take up new places in our own internal system, so that we can then more and more be the ones who are this way for other people. It doesn't, I suppose what I'm saying is, for many of us, this doesn't come for free, and it doesn't come just because we read a text, or a source, or we imagine it. There's work to do. And it also can't be the work of dominating, of inner cruelty, or inner domination, or we have to bring the same kind of gentle, faithful attention to what arises inside us as we're committed to on the outside. And maybe maybe one of the reasons that you can't just look at this as inside or outside, you can't just look at this as individual or systemic, you have to look at everything at all the different scales at once. But it seems to me it might be true to say that our ongoing unwitting and witting cause of harm to one another also arises because we haven't all, and I include myself in this, done the work yet with what's inside to allow us to show up with the kind of grace and truthfulness and care that Beth Clark is inviting us into.
And there's the inner work part of that. But we say this all the time, Justin. What arises as you say that is, well, all that inner work feels rather impossible if I have to do it on my own.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, I need to have done that, but to do that, I can't just sit there in the stories I find myself in, trying to work my way out of something or into something without someone or some people being with me in support of me as a human being. Like, that connectedness feels like the prerequisite to everything. If it's going to be done in the heartfelt, human centered way that any systemic change surely has to come from, in order for it, because it's in service of the humans, it needs to come from the human way, that the inclusive of all of our parts, as you were calling it. If it's not inclusive in that way, and I'm not held myself, how could I create something that didn't include the humans in the way that it was intended to? So I feel like the systemic and big changes that need to happen have to be surely underpinned by these human goodness connections, where it's like a kind of pay it forward system or something. Like when I really see you and hold you, you are then empowered to do what you need to do, or to be with who you need to be with. And then the complexity of that gets to also come back to the relationship as well. Like we can process together, we can talk together, we can work things out together. To have these systems of support and seeing and holding of the process of all of this, of the individual process of life, seems to me to be the most crucial kind of determinant of whether we can make the change happen that needs to happen in the world, because clearly it needs to. So I'm feeling really what it brings to me is a sense that there's things to be done, groups to be made, relationships to be nurtured, that then contribute to these bigger changes that we need. And it might not be that we see the contribution to those bigger changes, because that might be at this point too mysterious to know. So as you breastfeed a newborn baby, the consequences of that might be in 27 years' time or something. And we can't know everything. So I'm feeling inspired and faithful to all of the acts of kindness and seeing and beholding one another, that then, just as your professor at university spoke to you, become seeds that in 10 years' time get to be realized and grow into whatever they were intended to grow into. So I'm really grateful, Justin, to have this conversation and to feel like we're able to kind of take this forward into our days. And thank you for being here, and thank you for knowing how to be in the conversation and feeling it all as well.
Great pleasure, Lizzie.
So we'll be back next Sunday with a source by Justin this time. And next week, everybody will notice that I talk first, because that's the formula that Justin came up with. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks, everyone.